Okay, so I'm here to talk to you about the newest four-letter word in your language, and that is IRB. And most people, when they think IRB, think, this is just lots of hoops I have to jump through. Well, yes, it is, but, what I will tell you about IRB is we are not here to simply make you jump through hoops. We are here to, number one, protect human participants in whatever studies you are planning to do, and two, to help you with the ropes. Because sometimes students get off track with their research and then they get into trouble, and we don't like to deal with trouble. We want to see if we can prevent that if we can. So basically, anytime you are doing a study that, and the definition of research is a systematic method designed to, using human participants designed to contribute to generalizable knowledge. Okay, that is the federal definition of it, not ours. And you'll see it in your IRB application. And so basically what we need to do is to protect human participants, because the people in Tuskegee weren't protected. The people who had syphilis, and they didn't treat them even though penicillin was available because they just wanted to see how it progressed. The kids at Willowbrook that were given hepatitis were not treated. And we still have some unethical research that goes on in the United States. It happens all over the world, but it does happen in the United States. And sometimes it borders on happening here, and we have to deal with it, and I don't like it. So we want to make sure that everybody knows what ethical research is all about and how we protect. And we are not going to mess with the science or the methodology of your projects. If it's good science, fabulous. If it's not so good science, well, you're learning the ropes. We want to help you learn the ropes and protect the people that you're studying at the same time. What does generalizability mean? It means if you're going to present your findings at the Mountain Lion Research Day, if you're going to present them anywhere outside the classroom, then it needs IRB approval. Or at least you need to communicate with us so that we can determine if you need IRB approval. Okay? And I don't say that in a bad way. I'm just trying to save you guys some headaches and some heartaches, So I'm the chair of the IRB here, and I do lots of educational types of things just because people don't understand that there are federal regulations behind all of this. And so what I'm going to do tonight, I've given you a dozen tips for a successful IRB application, and let me tell you where this came from. They asked me to think of 10, and I immediately went way past 10, and I'm like, it's got to be a dozen. These are the things that we kept correcting over and over and over and over again on IRB applications. So we kind of did a little quantitative research with it ourselves and said, okay, we'll take the top 12. And so I've put these in a sheet for you, and I am not going to read this to you. I'm not going to go down it because you guys are perfectly capable of reading it yourselves. I may iterate some things for you, but what I want to do is show you where you can find things. If you go to the UCCS website and then you put in the, what I usually do is, I actually have it on my favorites, so I just pull it right up. But if you type in on the search box OSP, which means Office of Sponsored Programs, you'll find everything you need. And you'll come to this website. If you click on the Research Integrity Compliance tab right here, okay, what that does is it brings up all kinds of compliance things, and basically we are compliance. So if you click down to Research Involving Human Subjects, IRB, and click on that, what you will find is several things. You will find out when our IRB meetings are, where they are, all of our SOPs, a manual. You'll find the 45 CFR 46, which is our Bible. That is the federal regulation that governs IRBs and research. And that's where I quoted the definition of research to you from. We try to be really, really transparent. You'll find out who the committee members are, so you can find out who to scowl at when you're walking by them on campus. We have a non-compliance SOP and international research. We have students who are starting to collaborate with international entities. We have one up in health sciences right now who is just put in a grant. I was talking to him at 8 o'clock the other night about a grant that he's putting in with some people from Australia. So we have those kinds of collaborations going on. We have in there the Belmont report. The Belmont report is not the federal regulation, but is the guiding principle for IRB and human subjects research. And those three principles are autonomy, beneficence, and justice. And that's what came out of the Nuremberg trials, the Tuskegee, incident, the Willowbrook trials, the Milgram trials, and that really pretty much governs human subjects research. It's not very long. I think it's a good read, but it might put you to sleep. You might try it some night if you can't go to sleep. There's FAQs about IRB. There's submission procedure. I have a 2-hour-long video because I give this 2-hour class to graduate students every year. And so there's a video there. There's checklists. There's all kinds of things. And yes, even that is in there. Okay. So, resources. But if you're going to submit an IRB application, where you go to find forms, it's right here where it says IRB forms. Okay. And it has all the forms in Word documents for you to, and they all have fillable fields. If you're going to use a vulnerable population, which would be what? Underage what?
Like under 18.
Okay. Elderly really are not considered vulnerable. Some of them should be. And we do take it into account, okay, especially if they have dementia. But prisoners, and some of you may be working with prisoners, and pregnant women with they all have neonates, but pregnant women and neonates. Okay, we had, and she wouldn't mind me using this as an example, we had our first pregnant study here on campus. And she was looking at pregnancy-induced hypotension, it was blood pressure changes, okay? I can't remember whether it was hyper or hypo. And I'm a nurse, I should know that. But she was going to put some transducers on these women. And we had to consider the fetuses. When she started putting medical devices or things that would diagnose on women, what would be the effect or what's the safety risk to the fetus? And of course it turns out there was none, but we had to consider that. So it went to full IRB. So there's 3 types of review that we do here. Actually there's 4 now. One is we will review, if you have a question about, I'm doing a secondary data analysis. And what we will do is determine whether or not this is really human subjects or not, and we'll give you a letter if it's not. If it is human subjects research, then we will tell you, well, you're going to have to go through exempt or expedited, so go ahead and submit an application. And then the 2 that are pretty easily reviewed are the exempt, and it doesn't mean exempt from review, it means exempt from further review. We have to review it to determine whether it fits into one of 5 or 6 categories. And then there is the expedited. Now there really virtually is no difference between the review time for an exempt and the review time for expedited. And here's what I'll tell you. I had an expedited review for my dissertation. It took 10 months to get through the IRB. And it wasn't because I wasn't making the changes, it was because that's what it took at Walter Reed, because that's where I went through. Here at UCCS, we will respond to you usually within a day or two. Your faculty advisor submits, you submit to your faculty advisor. You can't submit to the IRB, the faculty advisor must. Then they submit to the IRB, it gets filed and put into a folder and sent out to reviewers. Okay, I usually get the reviewer, I'll get a protocol in, and then they send us an email saying you've got a protocol in your folder. They'll usually do that within a day, 2 tops. Right now it's taking them 2 because they're moving. And then I try to respond within 24 hours, 48 tops. Okay? And I will provide a review, and I'll basically say, I just read through your protocol, it's in the process, we're reviewing it as exempt or expedited, and before we can give approval, these things need to be addressed. I will tell you that I rarely approve one outright. It has to be extremely well written and very clear. And the reason is because there's usually some issues with how are you going to protect the data? How are you going to recruit? How are you going to, there's usually some little things, and the consent form needs to be written into 8th grade language and those kinds of things. Once I send you the review, and I'll send it to the IRB and CC you and your faculty advisor, this is the procedure with all of our reviewers, then how soon you get it re-reviewed depends on you. I have students who go for weeks, and then they want it reviewed yesterday. I have students who really are on the ball and get right going, and they send it right back, and we can re-review it and write the approval letter, and it's done. They can go forth and study. So really, it depends on you, a lot of it, once you get that initial review back. If you get on top of things and resubmit it through your faculty advisor to us. Now, we've had people complain because we said, be sure to check this box. Well, we're not going to change your application. If we tell you to uncheck this box and check this box, you have to do it. Because if we start doing those kinds of things for people, then we're starting down a slippery slope. So we won't do that for you. Here is the new application right here. That's what you want to use. Okay? And for all types of review, and the last type of review is full, and that's if you're using a vulnerable population. Now, we had a student one time who was using adults, but those adults had Down syndrome. So we went for a full review on that one. I do all the full reviews. I do all the veteran research. Because I'm a veteran and I know the ropes. Whether it's exempt, expedited, whatever, I usually have a couple of those in my box. So if anything looks like it's going to need full review, they'll send it to me, and I can say, well, it really doesn't, so send it out to so-and-so, another reviewer. So the thing you need to know about full reviews is we have to be able to do a primary review and send it out to the full board before the meetings. The meetings are always the last Tuesday of every month for full IRB, and we have to have it 2 calendar weeks before then, just so that we can process and send it all out, do the review, and get everything to everybody. And we have one reviewer, he's a community member. We have to have a community member on our board, and he doesn't do emails. So we have to FedEx it to him. He's 85 years old. And he's still,
Might as well somebody younger who's more applicable to using technology.
because it's really hard to find volunteers in the community who want the protocols.
Wow.
Come up here and fight with the parking, and this guy, he was the head of Memorial IRB for a long time, and he just loves doing this stuff, and he asks unbelievably appropriate questions. It's just really phenomenal to see him in action. So there is, if you're going to do with vulnerable populations, children, prisoner, or pregnant women, then you have to do an addendum. Just a checklist, okay? And then once we approve it, if it's exempt, you never have to come back and talk to us again unless you're gonna change something. And, then you have to submit a request for change. If it's expedited, it has a 1-year expiration. So, and I will tell you that, I'm gonna write, is a screen or a board? Right on this? Okay. Okay, that's my email, okay? You can email the IRB at irb@uccs.edu, and anybody there will be able to answer your question. And if they don't think they can answer it, they'll send it to me. If you want to email directly to me, I don't have a problem with that. We are here to teach. We are here to help you. We're not here to make life hard for you. Okay? There are hoops you have to jump through, and I'm not going to apologize for that because we don't want to see these research non-integrity or unethical research ever done again, ever. But it happens. So, if something goes wrong with your study, we will ask you to fill out an unanticipated event form, and then comes the inquisition. Okay? But still, even then, we try to cut you every break we can. We recognize that you're students. We recognize that you're learning. There is a template for the consent form. Okay? It tells you what to put in there, where, and the language that's already in there, we ask you not to change because some of it's legal. But I will check from purpose of the study through benefits to make sure it's written at the appropriate grade level. I read, or it was put out somewhere last year, that kids enter college with a 7th grade reading level. Mm-hmm. So, even with if you're going to be, consenting college kids, we ask you to put it in at least at most an 8th grade. Shorter sentences, shorter words. It's really simple as that. You can get it down. Okay.
Is there a tool that says what grade level or something like that?
Yes.
It's like
if
on
you
Word
are
or
in
something?
Word
Oh, okay.
and you go on review and you do spell check, you can. If it doesn't come out with the grade level or the Flesch Kincaid reading ease, then you can go into your settings and click a box that will bring it up, okay? And so I will check that portion of it. I won't check the legal portions of it, but I will check that portion of it to make sure.
And it supposed to be 8th grade or 7th grade?
8th grade. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of parents, or a lot of people in the community who can't read even at that level. So when I have to do, and I've been doing informed consents all week because I've been down in Trinidad and Pueblo collecting data this week with college students, and I put it in front of them and I say, take 2 copies. One's for you to keep and one's for me. You have to sign it. And they start taking it out and signing it, and I'm like, whoa, wait a minute, we have to go through this. And I have to make sure you understand what you're doing. So I practically read it to them, and I don't mince any words with them with the consent because it's really important that's why it's called informed consent. Okay. Sample video consent. The assent form, that's for kids. If you're using kids over the age of 7, they have to have parental permission, and they have to say, yes, I want to be in my study. And for the assent form, we ask that it be put into, if you're looking at 4th graders, it's got to be in 4th grade level. Okay? And you don't have to explain all the legalese with the kids. You just say, here's what I'm doing. Hi, my name is such and such. I'm looking at how kids exercise. And so I'm going to ask you to wear this really cool wristband that's going to measure how much the actigraph, going to measure how many steps you're taking while you're out on the playground. And then I'm going to look at it, and I'm going to put your data with other people's data, and it's all going to be together, and I might give a report to your PE teacher. And your parents have said it's okay for you to be in the study, but it's okay if you don't, kind of thing. And so, and you have to go through that with the kids. So, and they have to check yes or no and sign their name. They think that's cool, So, if you're going to be using an agency, we ask for a letter of access. This is important because we want to make sure that the agency, and I will tell you that the school districts here, some of them have IRBs. D11 does, and the person, and so on your, in here, it's under research with local school districts, if you go back one, she has this, Sarah did this really cool thing where it says, okay, if you're using this district, here's who you contact, we put, like for D11, it's Janine, Debbie Smith, and we've got her phone number and an email. You know, so it's not always enough for you to get a letter from the principal of the school. If it's a district, if it's part of District 11, she needs to know about it. Okay, so if you're doing work with the prison, let's just say you're doing work down at ComCore, and you're you know, even if you're using data from there, we want to see a letter that says ComCore is going to give you de-identified data. Okay, so that's really important. The letter of access is important. We do electronic informed consent. All the studies or all the surveys I'm about to send out to the 1,000 or so students that are in our larger region, it has a consent form up front, and they have to read through it, and then they click I agree, and they click that they're over 18, then they get taken to the survey. So we'll ask for that kind of a cover page, but it has to have all the elements of informed consent. So the forms are here, and I don't really want to take up other people's time, so I just want to quick ask if you guys have any questions. If you do, feel free to ask. If you don't want to ask in front of everybody else, there is no such thing as a dumb question. You can email me, but are there any questions about, yes?
If I plan on using female active duty veterans, will I have to do a full review or expect to do a full review?
There's no such thing as female active duty veterans.
Just mean active duty.
Or active duty?
I was confused too.
Female active duty. You have to go through the IRB processes at whatever base you're going to be using. Which means, let's just say it's at Carson. You have to go through the Carson, and actually Carson is kind of difficult because their IRB of record is Madigan up in Washington.
Madigan's a hot mess.
It is, I know, I have a station.
And
Sorry.
and it's tough, and those medical center IRBs, like I said, it took me 10 months to get through Walter Reed with an expedited study. So check into it, really, before you start, you know. And I get, you know, because I was active duty myself when I went through my dissertation. I was in school, and I not only had to go through Walter Reed, but I had to go through Womack, and I had to go through the one for I can't even remember it now. The one at Louisville.
The one on Fort Knox?
Yeah. Fort Knox.
Got a hospital here.
Yeah. I mean, it was insane, and plus I had to go through the UMass. So now sometimes we get into a chicken and egg situation where an IRB or an agency will say, well, I won't give them a letter of access until I see the IRB approval from, and we'll say, well, we won't give the approval until we see the letter of access. So sometimes and we don't like to do this often, but sometimes we'll do conditional approvals, where we can approve it conditionally, but it is not approved for you to collect data until we see the letter of access and take the conditional off of it. But it's just so that we can, you know, work with. And if you're doing something in your role as a student, then we become the IRB of record. And a lot of times the bases will recognize this, like the academy will. They're pretty good, the academies. they have an IRB, and I believe me, I talk to them on a frequent basis because I check up on these things. I'm not one of those that's just gonna rubber stamp. I make sure that because I have a big federal grant. And if people start messing up on their research, it puts my federal grant in jeopardy. I don't want that to happen, okay? So you've heard of these universities getting shut down. All their research gets shut down. And that means that if I do something that mess up, then it puts somebody over in computer sciences at risk, or somebody in education. So I kind of tend to be a real detailed stickler when it comes to IRB and research compliance. Yes?
So letter of access is more for if you want information from an agency, like number of expulsions or something?
No. Oh, if you want to look at number of expulsions and you're getting student records, it's down in the corner. Is it down in the corner? I see it. I clicked it too many times. Basically, what we want is a letter from the district saying that it's okay for you to get that data.
Mm-hmm. So then what exactly is the letter of access, like what are you accessing on?
Well, you're accessing their student records. Now, and I will also tell you that if you want to access our student records, we're going to start requiring a letter of access from the registrar here. Because we've had too many FERPA, we're starting to they're really starting to crack down on FERPA stuff. You guys know what FERPA is. It's the Educational Records Protection Act, okay? And stuff that is not, stuff like, believe it or not, age and ethnicity is FERPA protected. Because it's not directory information, but they can give me student ID numbers.
Emails.
Go figure. Well, emails that's directory information. But grades, grade point average, enrollment, age, ethnicity. Now I can look at you and tell you with probable certainty that you are female, and you're probably in the 30-ish age range, somewhere in there. And that's public information. But, if I don't know you, that's not public information. And it's not in the directory that we have a 39-year-old who's whatever. So that's FERPA protected. So that's what FERPA is. And so we can't just be handing that kind of data to the students who want to study that. They have to ask for it, and then we give permission. And they have to tell us how that's going to be protected, how they're protecting it. So we've got some issues right now that we're dealing with, and it's not fun to deal with those kind of issues. It's just not fun. I don't enjoy it at all. Other questions? Okay, that was like a majorly down and dirty. Watch the video if you want the details, okay? Or email me if you have questions. Please don't hesitate to, because that's what I'm here for. Is the one for you guys. I wouldn't be here, so there you have it.
And I'm here to help you with before you get to start that. I'm here with the literature review. That's where I get to help you with. So when you're ready to talk about that, that's what I'm here for. So let's talk about library stuff. So for one thing, when you do your literature review, you're going to bring in a mix of different types of resources. You're going to be bringing in that scholarly stuff. So if you do not recognize some of those things down there, you probably should be shooting me an email after this. It's okay, I don't feel like a failure as a librarian, but I do want to make sure we're all on the same page about where to go to find the scholarly stuff, because that's super important. As well as finding other things that are not going to be so scholarly per se, like especially if you're doing a lot of government research or you're doing a lot of direct policy information. That's not technically what we call peer-reviewed information, and there's a whole different skill set we go find that kind of stuff. And I can help you with either one of those. And again, no shaming about what you feel uncomfortable with. If you just have a research question right now and you've got questions you want to talk to me about what kind of information is out there, we can go ahead and meet right now this semester. You may have noticed that there is something in here. I will be out probably about mid-June is what I'm anticipating, but I will be here until the end of the semester definitely, and I'll look back in the fall, so don't worry, I will be here.
That's
good planning on your part.
It was
Oh,
good,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Someone say maybe. All right, and again, this is my services for you, just some of the things I do. So if you haven't met me, hi, I am your librarian, and I really am here to help you to succeed. I'm here throughout the entire program, especially through the capstone. I look forward to watching your capstone presentation or going through your dissertation defense. It's going to be a lot of fun, I swear. So you can contact me in many different ways. There's my contact information there. I understand you guys have busy schedules and busy lives. You have families and research and everything and jobs. So if you prefer to meet online, just let me know how you want to meet, and that's absolutely fine with me as well. We can meet online, in person, work via phone, email, whatever is most convenient for you. Pretty much, like I said, if you're ready to start working on your literature review, or you even have an idea of what you want to work on, we can get you set up right now. You could actually go into your capstone already having all of your resources done, and that's one thing off your list. I would also like to mention, if you haven't heard about RefWorks yet, then shame on me again, because RefWorks is a great tool to use to organize all of your citations, regardless of where you're pulling your data from. So it's just a nice little website that's kind of like, if you guys use EasyBib or something like that, RefWorks is a much better version of it because it works with all these different tools and it saves that information to your account, to your student accounts. So it's just a nice little thing for you to use. We do offer workshops in the library on it. However, if you just want to meet with me individually and talk about it, I can show you as well how to use that. So we're all about trying to make your guys' life so much easier so you don't have to stress over the small things such as formatting your citations into APA, right? Do you have yeah, APA. Okay. I know some people are very flexible, and so I try to know most of these. Also, if you're one of those DIYers, you like to do it yourself, you want to get a head start, there's already an online guide for you guys to go to. So you can go to this link. It's also available right off the library's website, and it actually kind of walks you through the process of what other capstone students have found useful when they're doing their literature review. Whether it's finding scholarly articles, going for government research, or even using that RefWorks thing. Kind of gives you an online place for you to go play with. Also has my contact information, of course, too. And there's a nice little form right on the front that says, you know, if you'd like to make an appointment with me, just fill out this form, and it just gets sent to me. So, easy way to connect. Just a few other things. I think this is going to be my official last semester. I have to talk about the VPN thing. If there's anyone in this room still using that VPN thingy, I'm sorry. You don't have to. They are actually killing it over the summer, so it is going away. Instead, again, we really have a much easier way of accessing the library website. Additionally, if you're a big fan of Google Scholar and you don't know how to set up your library links, let me know, because that's how you get to full text access without having to pay for things. And that is super important, because as students, you should never have to pay for the stuff you need to use for your capstone research. Again, start your research now, and I hope more than anything out of all of these slides, you guys realize that I'm a very accessible person. I'm not going to shush you or anything, so if you had stereotypes about librarians, please put them on your head. I really am here to help you succeed, and that's my job. And that's it. You handled 5 slides. Congratulations. Now, does anyone have questions for me? I always know people are like, oh, so much after the IRB.
So I'm still using the VPN. What is the new option?
Sure. So the new option is you don't have to worry about that at all. Where's your little fire to close? Is that over here? Oh, there it is. Since you asked, I know. You have very good vision. Okay, and I am totally gonna make this bigger for me because I need it. So what you want to do is either start with the library website, or are you a Google person? Yeah, it's okay to be honest. I'm a Google Scholar person. I love it, and if they ever took it away, there would be a reckoning. So you can either start from the library website, and what will happen is whenever you click on either one of our journal links or database links, it's going to ask you to log in if you were off campus, and it's just going to ask you to put in your UCCS username and password. For us Google Scholar people, rock on. We are united. You can go to scholar.google.com, and all you have to do is tell Google Scholar that you are affiliated with us. And you do that simply by going to your settings and going to your library links and just making sure you see University of Colorado, Colorado Springs there. If you do not see it there, that's no surprise when you're off campus. Since we're on campus, it's just like, hey, we know you're part of UCCS, you're good. But when you're off campus, Google Scholar doesn't know that, and you have to tell it. So all you have to do, if you don't see it, is just do a quick search for like University of Colorado, and just remember we're the cool kids at Colorado Springs, and check mark that. Once you do that, you get access to everything we have. And here's a good way of testing to see if we have it. So let's do, I'm a gamer, so I'll just do video games because that's what I do. Sorry, guys. You'll see these wonderful full text at UCCS links. It means you got us. So when you click on those, it'll actually take you back over to the library website and give you the good content. Cool? Great question, by the way. I have a feeling sometimes students are afraid to tell me, like, I don't even know what VPN is, so you don't have to worry about it.
So I've gone down a rabbit hole before on the website through one of the databases that sends me to a different database that has links to other databases.
To another journal, right?
To another journal
Yeah.
that cites other articles that are similar, and then I'll find the one that I need, and then I'll get the full text from there. It's kind of weird. I mean, is that?
I love it, and that's the way it works. And I'll have to tell you, if you're finding like citations that you really want to use,
Right.
I'll tell you 9 times out of 10, if you just take that article title or book title and put it in Google Scholar, it's going to tell you if we have
Okay,
access
so
to
that'd
it.
be a lot easier then. Okay.
It's so much easier now.
Cool.
Back in the day, it was really hard, but we're trying to make it a lot easier.
Last week.
The caveat is, epic fail moment there. One of the caveats is, if you're just a regular Google person, that's all you've been using, really do switch over to Google Scholar for your scholarly research. If you're looking for books, journal articles, conference proceedings, citations, you really should be using Google Scholar. Google is still good for government information and government reports, which are open access.
So just FYI, when you push the site, and if you're
Oh yeah.
using that, those are not accurate.
It depends on what you're actually pulling from. So, for example, I am a Chicago person, and I'll tell you that's actually not too bad. It's not perfect.
APA is wrong a lot.
One thing I will give a shout out is for those RefWorks people. Look, it's right there. So you can go ahead and click on that and import all that lovely data over into your RefWorks. So
you have to make a RefWorks account.
you do have to make a RefWorks account, which is probably the most annoying part of the process. But once you do, it's yours. You can actually take it with you after you graduate too.
And so that holds everything that you've ever cited through this.
As long as you imported it in, it's there. So you're actually going to see some of my Walking Dead research, as well as my web analytics, which is actually what I research. But Walking Dead's more of a passion. But yeah, whatever I pull in, it brings it down in there. So yeah, there's all my stuff that I've never bothered to organize into folders and that kind of thing.
Now, I've been using Microsoft Word, the newest edition, where it has the whole APA format and the citing and help. Yeah, is this kind of like similar to that?
Very much so.
Okay,
So
but
you
this
go-
saves it on that.
Yeah. So you can do whatever citation style you want, that kind of thing. I'll do APA 6. I'll just do HTML because we're going to make it really fast on the fly. Preferences, I'm just going to say, sorry, I'm going to. Okay.
That'll be good for all the times I go use this.
Right.
Yeah.
So it kind of formatted it for you. Now, is it perfect? No, absolutely not. But it's a great start. It's going to save you time because it at least has all the variables you need to cite it, including the authors, the year, the actual article titles, the name of the journal, volume, issue, and that kind of thing. So you should always check it with the APA handbook, or if you prefer, using something like the UCCS Writing Center, which is also a very awesome service. Like my zombification ones, yeah. Notice that some of these are in criminal justice journals, I will have to say. That's right. Any other questions, guys? All right, well, you know where to find me, and again, I hope you do find me when you're ready for me.
Deborah and Pulaski, you've probably seen emails from me, if nothing else. Nice to meet you. Good to see some of the familiar faces, and I'm always happy to see new faces. So, to start off, how many of you are signing up for Capstone or Thesis this coming fall? Okay. How many of you are here because you're going to sign up for methods in the fall? How many of you are just like, I just am nervous about this process, so I want to know more? Okay, good. So we're kind of running the gamut. So first and foremost, I am here to try to calm your nerves and tell you that for those of you signing up for fall, thesis or capstone, congrats, because that means you are almost done with your master's degree, and you're at a really exciting place where you get to do some research and apply everything that you've been doing in your program in this final project. So yes, it might be a little nerve-wracking, especially after hearing IRB stuff that may seem foreign to you, but it's also really exciting. Okay, it's good, it's a good thing. You are doing the right thing in terms of the projection of getting your degree accomplished. It's also good if you're here just because you're trying to figure out if you want to go the thesis route or the capstone route. There are strengths to both, and it really depends on what you want to do. What I tell people in thinking about it is you want to think about the product that you're going to have at the end. So depending on what you want to do, if you want to go on to a PhD program, then we highly encourage you to do the thesis. Now, even if you don't, the thesis could be a good option because you also want to think about the process. So if you're someone who needs a little bit more kind of self-direction, having a class structure is good for you with set deadlines, capstone could be a good option. If you're pretty independent already in terms of how you work really well one-on-one with a faculty member, thesis could be a good option. Depending on whether or not you really want to partner with an agency, that is what the capstone is all about. You partner with an agency in the community. Usually it's local, but sometimes it's not. But you're doing the project that they need done. So sometimes that lines perfectly with your interests, but sometimes it's really about picking the agency you're interested in working with, and then what do they need in terms of the project. Where in a thesis, you really have more agency in what you want to do. So it depends on the route that you want to take. So I can talk about both of them in terms of the process, and then just open it up for general questions if you think that would be the most helpful. Okay, all right. So first and foremost, if you are going to take methods in the fall, or you're in methods right now, this is a good time to really start thinking about the capstone or the thesis. So either one really requires preparation ahead of time. So prior to signing up and showing up on the first day of class, you want to have done some work. Primarily, you want to, for the capstone, have an agency picked out. It's best if you've contacted them and you already know that they're willing to work with you. Think about so say I'm going to work with CSPD. I may go to CSPD and say, here are some things I would like to work on. And they may say, that's great, we can't do any of that right now. Or they might say, well, we can take this project as a starting point, and we might have a need for that. And so it looks good when you've thought about it, even if none of those ideas end up being your final project, right? You're putting in the initiative. So you want to have an agency picked out, you want to contact them, and you also need to have your second reader. So with the capstone and the thesis, each are going to have 3 people involved in your committee. The capstone is going to have the faculty member who teaches the course, and that varies each semester. So in the fall, I believe it will be Dr. McConkey. Then you have a second reader. The second reader is going to be content area. For those of you who are in criminal justice, if the faculty member of the class is a PAD person, you must have your second reader be a CJ faculty member. Because they're going to look for content area. So are you incorporating criminological theories, for example? Are you using appropriate methods based on what's done in the field? If, however, conversely, you have a CJ faculty member teaching the course and you are a PAD student, then your second reader should be someone on the public administration side. Okay, so you want to make sure that content area is matching up in terms of second reader. You need to ask them if they will be your second reader. It's not just an automatic default that they will do it just because you like them and you hope that they'll work in the project. So approach them early and ask if they're willing to work with you. Usually you're going to hear a yes. But in the off chance that they have a really busy semester, maybe they're going to be on sabbatical, something unusual has happened, you could get a no. And so then you need to move on to your next person. Like I said, generally you're going to hear a yes. So the third person for the capstone is your agency person. So you're going to have a reader from the agency that you work with. So again, if I'm sticking with the CSPD example, I now have the faculty member of the course, I have a second reader, and CSPD has one person really that they designate, Amanda Terrell-Orr, who's fantastic, who works with all of the Capstone projects, and she'll want to sit down and talk to you about what you're going to do. She'll be the one who comes to your final presentation, she'll look over the IRB, she'll help draft that letter, and so the letter that Deb was talking about, I like to think of it as a partnership letter. So no matter what agency you work with, you're going to have a letter that says, yes, Michael is going to be able to work with us. We agree that this is his study. He's going to have access to this data. We're going to provide him with a space to look at this, because maybe there's files that you can't take off the premises. And that happens quite a bit, especially with DOC, CSPD, and in some cases even elementary schools, right? Schools in town. If there's confidential records, you can't take them off campus, or off location, I should say. So they will have to provide you with a space. What that does is it gives IRB an idea that you are doing everything that you say you're going to do, and the partner agency knows that that's what you're going to do too. There's just a general understanding. So that's the way I like to think about it. Because I know we use the education example, but it's broader than that. So any agency you work with, whether it's city or local government, CSPD, law enforcement of any agency, we've had to do this with federal agencies, school systems, nonprofits, you have to have the partnership letter. So that's kind of the route for the capstone. Then what you really want to do is start the IRB process early, because the IRB process is the most time consuming. Because IRB it's a form that you essentially have to map out your entire project. If you're going to do a survey, SurveyMonkey is a great tool for students. You can have, I think it's 10, it might be 12 questions for free, but some of the faculty here in SPA actually have access to SurveyMonkey, some of the agencies have access to it, so it's a good way to get data pretty quickly. You actually have to build the survey and send it to IRB to review. So in terms of what you fill out, you're going to tell them what your question is, who you're going to collect data from, how you're going to protect those individuals, how you're going to store the data, how you're going to analyze the data, who's going to have access to the data. You're also going to talk about what you're going to do with the data. So are you going to present it simply in the capstone class? Are you going to do mountain lion research project? Is it something that you could get a publication out of? Does your agency want a technical report? I mean, there are different things that could come from this research, and so you have to tell IRB all of that. If you're going to do a survey or interviews, you have to come up with the questions. So that's why I say you want to start early, because the most time-consuming piece is the IRB, and as you heard, very rarely do you just get a complete approval. We work with you so that we can try to catch all of those little instances where you might need to change some phrasing or explain something early on, but usually they send it back and say, explain this or fix this. And so there's just a turnaround time that you need to account for. Your best option is to have the IRB done, or at least under review, when the semester starts. If not, very early in the semester. Because then you're setting yourself up in terms of the timeline to have the most time to collect your data, to analyze the data, and to get it done while minimizing the amount of stress.
Semester of capstone or semester of the class before capstone?
Semester of capstone.
Okay.
So for those of you in research methods right now, or if you're going to take methods in the fall and then complete capstone or thesis, but capstone in the spring, you want to use that time in methods because you're starting to think about your proposal, right? Use that time to come up with a question, think about a possible agency, consider who you might want for a second reader, and start to draft your IRB. Now you're not just swimming out there in the middle of the lake all by yourself. I mean, we know what the IRB process is like, and there's a learning curve, right? So just sitting down and really thinking about what is this project going to be, what are some things that I need to consider, and you have to bounce ideas off one another, which is why it's good to think about it in the methods course, but it's also why you want to pick your second reader early and start talking to them. So set up meetings, say, can we talk about my methodology on this day? And then maybe you're going to draft the IRB, and then you're going to go in there and talk about the language or the wording or come up with questions. that is probably the best way to do it, so that you're really working with your second reader. Or if you're going to work very closely with the person who's teaching the course, that's also another good option. You can meet with both of those, your second reader and the faculty instructor, in terms of the IRB. The person who is teaching the course is the one who has to submit it. So ultimately, they will have final approval before it gets sent to IRB. We have a really good relationship with IRB. The turnaround is actually very quick. What does take a while is if you need to fix things but don't do it promptly. And so then that back and forth can add more time. So that's kind of setting you up for the capstone. So you're working with an agency. It's really the agency's need, but that could match your interest. Again, you're being exposed to networking, right, to having a final product that you are supporting an agency with. If you're thinking about wanting to, work locally, especially within the agency or something similar in terms of what you do for your capstone, it can be really good for networking and getting some hands-on experience within that organization. So that's a few of the strengths in terms of the capstone. Again, it's more structured in the sense that you go meet, I would say once a week, but you don't meet every single week for capstone. There's some weeks where you don't meet because you're working on stuff, but you have that class structure. Now the thesis is similar in the sense that you have a committee of 3 people. So you're going to have a committee chair. This is a faculty member that you're going to work very closely with. Pick someone who, in terms of what you want to do, has some experience in this topic. Okay, don't come to me if you want to do Homeland Security. I don't know enough about it to help you on a thesis in that area. If you want to talk human trafficking, you want to talk corrections, you want to talk gender and crime, I'm your person, or at least one of the few people you could ask. Right? So pick based on content area. And then really think about whether or not you can work with that person. I mean, you're going to work very closely with them, so you want to make sure that you have a good rapport, that they communicate with you in a way that is effective and meets your needs. It doesn't have to be that it works for somebody else, it just has to work for you. Then you have 2 other people. These are committee members. They're faculty members. Usually you'll have at least one more within SPA. And then you can also have someone outside that has similar content area. So in CJ, we often will pull from sociology, sometimes communication, political science. It depends on what the topic is that you're studying. Now these 2 readers will look over a proposal. They'll give you some feedback along the way, but it's really that first person, that chair of your committee, that's going to be working with you most directly. So the thesis is over 2 semesters. Now this can be summer and fall, spring and summer, fall and spring. There's a combination there, but you're doing the work for 2 semesters, so it's 6 credits versus the capstone, which is 1 semester. Though again, you want to start early, and it's 3 credits. So the other thing about the thesis is it's your project. It's not an agency's project. It's not even the faculty's project. Now the faculty member could have data that you're interested in that you could use, but you get to pick the topic. So if that's really important to you moving forward, the thesis could be a good route, right? Because you're not bound to the interests of other people. So I know Stephen has an interest in working on women in the military, right? So what you could do with a thesis is really figure out who's going to be your population, what kind of questions do you want to know, right? What is your research question, and then how can you address that. At the end of the day, you're going to have, whether you do capstone or thesis, you're going to have really strong products that indicate you can do research, right, and give you marketable skills in terms of communication, written and verbal, so you have to do a presentation for both. But it's kind of the route in which you want to take to get there. So thesis, again, 2 semesters. It can be a little bit more independent. I mean, you have to be able to kind of work on your own. But the faculty member you choose to work with can set deadlines. You can have regular meetings. You can structure it very much like an independent study. So that depends on what you need, right, and what they're willing to do. So there's flexibility there. Both of them usually require IRB. And I know that's the process that makes people nervous. But like I said, work with your faculty person, so whether it's one of your readers or whether it's the chair of your thesis committee, because they will be instrumental in helping you through that process. You're not navigating that on your own. At the end of the capstone, you have presentation. You give your client agency is invited to come in, your second reader, and then of course everyone in the course. They open it up to anyone in SPA as well. So you give a presentation based on what you learned, and you make suggestions for the agency. Thesis is very similar. Usually it's in this room. You sit in this room, you give a presentation about your project. So again, you're going to talk about existing literature, what was your methodology, talk about how you analyzed the data that you collected, whether it was secondary data that you used or if you went out and collected your own. And then usually policy implications, kind of the conclusion point that we talk about. In both cases, you're evaluated by your three people, right? So either your faculty member, second reader, and your agency person, or your three committee members. With a capstone, you get a grade in the course. With a thesis, you get a grade on the thesis. And you're told whether or not you have to make changes, and that happens, people in capstone have to make changes from time to time too, before they're officially done. So the outcome is not drastically different in terms of the presentation and the final paper. Capstone paper is limited to 25 pages. Thesis has no limit. So I've seen some that are 30, I've seen some that are 60. But when you collect your own data, you include the survey. You have a lot of tables. So there's a lot of extra stuff in there that you wouldn't have necessarily in a capstone project that you have really that are appendices in the thesis.
So
Yes.
with the secondary data deal, if there's literature or there's studies that are done that we don't, based on our knowledge that we've gained throughout the time here, that we don't necessarily agree with or we don't think is fully correct, can we take and challenge an article essentially, review the data that they used if possible, and pretty much write a rebuttal to somebody's article or somebody's research?
Well, you can write a research question that would challenge an existing point of view.
Okay.
We do that all the time in academia.
Right. I just want to know if we can do that thesis-wise as well.
It's possible depending on the question that you're trying to answer. So it's the way the question is framed, but it's an option. And then in terms of the data that you have, right, whether or not that can actually answer that question, or the data that you collect. The other option is to do a meta-analysis, where you're actually looking at literature. So you're going to do searches for, say we're doing sexual assault in the military. You're going to do a very in-depth lit review, so to speak, of all of the research that's been done. And you are going to analyze that for themes. You're going to look for commonalities within all of the studies that exist. And you're going to talk about kind of the big picture in terms of this research. And so that's one where the data is the literature itself. You're not going out and doing surveys or doing interviews, for example. And that's another option.
So
and
no
that's
IRB.
something for the thesis route.
No IRB in
There's
that.
no IRB.
Oh.
No. Secondary data is great for both the thesis and the capstone, because what we usually do is we send something to IRB, say we have secondary data, we just want to make sure that this would be exempt, and they email back and say yes. So you want that confirmation. But it's faster in terms of you're cutting out having to collect it yourself and the IRB time. But it's not always appropriate depending on the question that you're asking. It can be hard to get. Here.
So with the meta-analysis, could you do that for the capstone or thesis project, or would that be more if you're writing a thesis, you could do it the meta-analysis
That would
route?
be a thesis. Unless, for some reason, the agency that you're working with, in order to best address their question or their need, would be a meta-analysis. But in terms of the amount of work you would do, it's more along the lines of a thesis anyways.
For the thesis, if it's over 2 semesters, how do you get a grade the first semester? You
It's
don't complete a
considered
project.
in progress. So you're not penalized, you're just given a IP. And so it carries over and you get a grade at the end. So you're really getting one grade for both semesters. Just like in the capstone, you're only getting one grade as well.
So the thesis is 2 semesters. Do you have to enroll for 2 semesters? Just twice in tuition.
It is, but you take 3 hours less electives
Yes.
if you want. You just have to get to that total hours for your degree.
Yeah, so it is balancing out.
Yeah.
Already have electives.
Oh, do you?
But it sounds essentially that a capstone, you need basically a non-faculty sponsor to say we want this information. And a thesis, you can use a question. If no one wants to sponsor it, you can do it by yourself.
I mean, in its most simplistic form, that's exactly what it is.
Also, just to throw this out here, I just want to make you guys aware that you do have to have a 3.5 GPA or better to do a thesis, to be approved to do a thesis for the SPA policy. Not that none of you don't, just put it out there.
What are some other questions that you have about either thesis or capstone? Carrie.
If you have no idea what you even want to do it on, where would you start looking for ideas for topics?
So that's one of the hardest, right, things, whether you're going to go thesis or capstone. And my answer to you is not a simple one. I would say it probably takes some self-reflection and thinking about, well, what do you want to do after this, right? And that's not an easy question for many of us. Because you're really setting yourself up to network, right, or to show that you can do something in line with an interest that you have. But also think about the faculty members here that you might want to work with. So if you're thinking the thesis route, and you have a few people that you know that you work with really well, you can go talk to them and say, do you have any data? Do you have any ideas? Can I just brainstorm with you? Same thing for capstone. I mean, if you're not connected via internship or work to an agency, and you're just like, I have no idea, find a faculty member, brainstorm, right? Think about what's been done already, who have you partnered with. I can tell you right now, we've had people partner with Team Corp, with DOC, lots with CSPD, yes, thank you, DHS, and I'm trying to think. I mean, the Boy Scouts.
State Patrol?
There have been some federal agencies for thesis, but I haven't seen any for capstone, but that doesn't mean that it hasn't been done either. I mean, we're really well connected locally, so there's lots of agencies. It's really just starting to think about who might you want to work with, and not just on a project, right? Beyond that. I mean, that's kind of my biggest suggestion in terms of that answer. Now, they might not have anything for you right now, so then you just go to the next one, right? Who else might you be interested in working with? For the capstone, it's figuring out the agency before the question. For the thesis, it's really starting to think about broadly maybe what that question or what that topic could be, and then talking to a faculty member to try to narrow it to a research question.
Do you recommend, like, if we want to contact an organization to see if they're interested, what kind of person, who are we contacting? Like a public official or a PR person? So I don't know.
No, I would say usually it's someone probably in human resources, or if they have like a program director that will kind of, if they don't have the answer, they will tell you who you need to talk to.
Oh.
Other questions?
So for capstone, the second person has to be a faculty member. So if I'm doing mine, it has to be a CJ. What if the topic that I'm going to do capstone on isn't necessarily considered a criminal justice question? Is that okay? Because I'm a MCJ person, does it still have to be?
As an MCJ person, you should still have an MCJ faculty member. But we can talk about whether or not that's best for your project. I mean, there's some flexibility there. But in terms of the fact that as a criminal justice student, you should still be incorporating some sort of criminological theory into your project. You should have a CJ person.
Okay. So what if the agency's needs don't have anything to do with criminological theory? Am I
Then I
choosing
say-
the wrong agency then?
No, not necessarily, right? Because you want to pick an agency that you have an interest in. But then I would say you're also probably an exception to the rule. It doesn't happen very often where there's no matchup at all. So let's just talk about what some options are. Who Because we also want to make sure it's best for the project, which is best for the agency. Other things.
If we plan on doing a meta-analysis,
Yes.
I'm assuming that we need to dig up literally as much possible literature on the subject as that's out there.
Yep.
Now, does that include pieces that are written that are not essentially officially like scholarly published, for sense, in essence, certain military magazines, stuff like that?
It could, depending on your topic. Your focus will be scholarly,
Right.
but depending on the question that you're seeking to answer. So, for example, I'm working with a student right now who's doing a meta-analysis that has to do with media coverage of mental illness. Well, then what makes sense to also include actual media coverage, right? So it's not just
Right.
about the scholarly articles. We have to pull in some of the actual examples. So it depends on the question, which, is the answer for so many things, which I feel like you probably think is a cop-out, but really, it really does depend on
You're
the
talking about
question.
using like articles from like the Army Times
Well,
and stuff like that.
Kind of. I'm not talking like the MP's magazine,
Yeah.
the Dragoon, the Engineers magazine. People who have dealt with women in the military and combined units for a long time now versus those that have not.
Yeah, and so it's about perceptions.
Yeah, exactly.
Women within certain roles in the military,
Right.
it might make sense, to use all of those in addition to the scholarly articles.
Okay.
But if it's not about that, right, if it's more, what are the existing strengths of, I'm just kind of pulling this out of left field, but then maybe you're just going to do scholarly articles since 2012. There's going to be a lot of variation. Other things. How can I calm your nerves?
In the research class, because I understand you take the methods class. You take the methods regardless if it's capstone or thesis.
Right.
But is there more specific guidelines once we get that class, like your thesis only use stuff from 2012 forward, or is there, you know what I mean? Is there like more of a specific outline given, or is it just kind of yes, I do the research, have fun next semester?
So one of the goals of that course is to have a product in terms of really having a proposal. So coming up with methodology, starting preliminary literature, of course having the question, depending on what you're doing, hypotheses set. Now it's not set in stone, you can change it. But in terms of that, again, it really depends on the question, right? So if mine is time sensitive, I want to look at how something has changed over time. I may need to pull from the 1990s to now. If I'm looking at recent change in policy, I may be looking at just 2012. So you'll get more guidance from the faculty member because you'll have a research topic in draft form, right? It's not necessarily set in stone, but so you'll get some feedback in that regard that can help you.
So the methods class are really like laying the foundation.
If you use it to your advantage, people go in and say, I need to just take it because it's a core course and I need to get it done. But if you use it as really thinking about trying to build towards whatever you end up doing, capstone or thesis, you can come out really prepared for that next step.
I've been working with my advisor for the past year. I'm taking research methods right now online, and I went in 3 months before, already having somewhat of an idea of what type of research I wanted to do and what type of question I wanted to ask. And so we basically used those two pieces of information, those two pieces of criteria, and I went into the class, and I basically used that as my main case study for almost all the homework assignments. And then so I tested it. I basically was constantly testing whatever I wanted to do ideally long term with correlating with those assignments.
And you're doing a thesis?
Yeah. And that really, I think that really helps conceptualize it, because sometimes you can walk into those concepts and it's really overwhelming. But if you walk in with an example in mind, then you can kind of picture how it would look like in your product.
Which is a great way to do it. And even if you're thinking about capstone route, again, starting early in terms of talking to a faculty member, identifying an agency, and talking to them. So when I work with students on capstone, I actually meet with them and the agency so that all of us are on the same page in terms of what the expectation is, and then I can work with the student in terms of making sure we're on the same page of what the agency wants. So in terms of writing the IRB, for example. And so we do that early, and it may feel like, you're working before the class has started and you're not sure that this is the right way to do it, but then when the class starts, you feel like you're so much further ahead, and you're setting yourself up to get the project done on time, which is also important, because anytime you're collecting your own data, you never know what could happen, right? If you're just doing a survey, surveys are pretty easy to create, they're easy to distribute, but you might not get anyone to respond, and it might take weeks before you get anything, and so you have to factor that into your timeline, right? That's why working ahead, never too early to start thinking about what your project may be, and to start talking to faculty members. You do not have to know everything right now, but having some ideas, being open to brainstorming, will be really helpful. Sorry, Jessica.
Is there anything different if you already work at the agency you want to work with?
So the only thing I would tell you is that you may not get to do the same thing you're doing for them now.
Yeah.
In terms of agency need, it's not necessarily going to be the job that you are assigned,
Yeah.
paid to do. You may have to do something above and beyond, and so that depends on the agency.
Okay.
But no, you're already networked in. If there's something that you know that they need done, approach them. Just say, "Can I do this for my capstone project?" Right? You're benefiting both the employer, which benefits you, and you're helping yourself in terms of.
That they should create for me.
Right.
I- okay,
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you can use that to your advantage, David.
So now knowing that the thesis class is actually 2 semesters long, and
One is not really a class. Think of it as more of an independent study.
okay, with my tight timeline of being graduated by spring of 17, would I have to take research methods this summer?
It's not
It's
that
It's
hard.
not enough. So would I have to take thesis and research methods together in the same semester? Because research methods is a mandatory.
Well, it is a prerequisite, so you're supposed
Yeah.
to take it. I think we could do the
You-
6 credits of thesis.
Yeah, I think you could, well, that's true, that's true.
Could I just
We could work
like-
something out.
Okay.
Yeah. It sounds like there's always an exception to figuring it out.
We always try to do what's best for the students, so if we have to, even if you took research methods in the first 3 hours of your thesis, if that was the only way to do it, we would ask the dean if we could do that.
It's not ideal.
No.
It's better to have
Right.
research methods under your belt, and I think it's better to do 6 credits of thesis at the same time, which, again, isn't perfect either. But it's doable. We can make it work.
I had talked to Vanessa last year when she did her thesis, and she told me, and I don't have my notes in front of me, but that her thesis, to be able to present, she didn't have, I don't remember what semester she graduated, but she didn't have like the end of that semester for her second semester. It was really like a month or 2 into the semester where she had to have everything ready and she had to pay for it to get bound. She said that was a surprise for her. But then she had to be ready. It wasn't like in like December she was presenting. It was more like in October, if it was the fall.
So there is a timeline with the grad college. So I can tell you for this semester right now, the deadline is April 15th to have presented it. But then you have time to make the changes that your committee suggests.
Oh, okay.
And then you turn it over to the library to bind. So they have to have a copy that's archived, and then most students buy a copy for themselves.
I think she said it was like a few $100s. And she said she just didn't know.
How much?
A few hundred, I think, is what she said.
But
I don't have my
I
notes, but I
think
don't
she bought copies for all of her committee members.
Oh, wow.
Um,
And hers was really long too. She said hers
Yeah.
was like 120 pages.
Oh my
gosh.
Crazy.
So I actually have 3. I should have brought them. I didn't think about it. I have 3 samples of theses in my office that are bound that I can go grab and bring to show you as examples. We don't have those for capstones because right now there's when the client works with the student, there's kind of a unwritten agreement that the client owns that research. We can't distribute it. But moving forward, so by the time you're thinking about capstone, we're going to have them sign a form that allows us to be able to bring them here and show you, and also potentially share those on the website or at Online Research Day with their permission.
So you'll present like halfway through the semester, because I'm planning to finish mine in the summer. So I'd present like halfway through the summer, make any changes, and then get it bound. That's how it will be.
Yeah.
For the thesis.
And I would say it's 3/4 of the way.
3/4.
Down half the way, yeah. There's a timeline. Same is true with Capstone, where Krista will start emailing you. You have forms that you have to fill out to graduate. And then with a thesis, though, the defense has a certain date. So, like I said, this time April 15th is the deadline. Where with the capstone, that is usually the second to last week of the semester.
I want to think she said the presentation or the defense part was only like 8 minutes. Does that sound familiar to you?
So it's a presentation. We usually say prepare 15 to 20 minutes
Okay.
worth of material. Then there's questions.
Okay.
And you step out of the room. The committee talks about what changes there should be. There's always changes. It's usually minor, right? But everyone feels like they got to tell you to do something. So then you come back in, and then we talk about how to make those changes and as smoothly as possible.
Okay. This is more like an hour.
Yeah, usually prepare for an hour.
No worries, 8 minutes. It could be longer.
Now with the capstone, you don't always get that feedback directly. So sometimes the reader will say, okay, watch the presentation, you have a week before you submit your final paper, here's some things I would address. But those comments go directly to the instructor. So you don't always get to fix those things right away, which impacts your grade.
So for the thesis,
They not send it to the student?
Depends on who's your reader.
so because the people that you're presenting to are your committee, they should be very familiar with your work, and you should be getting feedback all along. Is that right? Or at least from the chair.
Should. So you'll get feedback from the chair regularly. When I'm the chair, if I can just tell you from my own experience, I get everyone together at least once. I send out a draft that the student has for the thesis. This is for the thesis.
Wait,
so
you say
that they
everyone,
can
you're
get
talking about all the readers and the student.
the committee. Yeah.
The
So
committee. That's what you're
3
talking
people.
about. Okay.
So they give some feedback, some preliminary feedback on the draft to the student. So that way, it's not like we're reading it for the first time when you send it the final version. And also you have a little bit more information going into the actual defense in terms of what to expect. Right? If I said really bulk up your theory section, you probably know that I'm going in there and I'm going to ask you a theory question. Right? But if you've addressed that, you're going to be set. The other thing is your chair is going to make sure that you're ready. Right? They are going to be the one that's giving you the talks and saying, okay, let's talk about, what are the future directions for this project? Right? What are the policy implications? These are questions that you pretty much can expect to get. And you can talk through some of that with your chair. You're gonna be okay. You've been really doing all of this stuff in your classes, right? In terms of writing and standing up and giving presentations. It's just that we put these big fancy titles on there that say Capstone and Thesis, and then it causes you all this anxiety.
So it sounds like since this has to be in person, you can't pick like an adjunct professor to be one of your readers.
We have had instructors who are readers yet for both Capstone and Thesis. So it just depends on whether or not the content area is lined up, and that they're
But if they're
willing
like-
to do it.
But if they're adjunct professors and not even in the country right now.
Usually we don't do adjuncts.
Okay, so they have to be
full-time
someone here.
instructors, yeah.
So for the committee, we choose our chair and ask them, and then we also ask the other 2 people also.
So for the thesis, you do ask, kind of the informal way that you do this is you ask someone to be your primary person, right, your chair, and then you talk to them and say, who do you think is most appropriate? And so they can tell you, well, I think, so-and-so would be good. You may want to think about someone outside of the program, and then, yes, then you go and ask them. But you kind of talk about it together.
Or the chair, okay. Because I've already asked Dr. Ware. She said she would be my chair.
Right, so then
So
talk
just
to
go with
her about who she thinks should be on the committee.
And the committee should be in place before the beginning of that semester, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
You won't have a lot of direct communication with the second and third person on the thesis committee until you get more of a proposal done. Other things, questions, concerns? So we're getting to the time of year where students are going to start to defend. I would encourage you to go to some of these. So go sit in on the capstone presentations at the end of the semester. They're done in 2 days. Pick one, go for a little bit. There'll be some theses that are going to happen this semester. Pick one of those, right? Even if it's not a SPA one, if it works best with your schedule to sit in on one on poli-sci or sociology, for example, do that. We'll have some presentations in SPA in April. And so we send out that information and you can go sit in, and I think that will also help you in terms of just realizing that it's not as nerve-wracking as it may sound. You're going to be okay.